A wheelchair-bound child of 5 crossed a dangerous intersection to present drooping wildflowers to a fearsome motorcycle club member, unaware that this simple gesture would transform both their destinies permanently. The following day, 200 roaring bikes descended upon her peaceful street as a leather-wearing force assembled at her home with an unexpected purpose that would astound everyone at her school. What motivation could compel these tough bikers to abandon their plans and shield a single young child? How did a few simple flowers ignite a bond that challenged every preconception? The early atmosphere carried the fragrance of recently mowed lawns and flowering jasmine, while Emma Martinez, age 5, fiddled with the lavender ribbons adorning her wheelchair's wheels, her tiny palms already damp with moisture from the wildflowers she'd gathered since daybreak. Her beloved yellow dress featuring small butterfly prints, a gift from her deployed father in Afghanistan, stuck to her limbs in the muggy warmth, while the sugary taste of honeysuckle lingered on her lips with each inhale of the summer dawn. Through the weathered mesh door came her grandmother's voice, summoning her for the morning meal, accompanied by the comforting sounds of crackling bacon and bubbling coffee that typically soothed her. Yet this particular morning, Emma found herself captivated by something across the road. A procession of bikes arriving at Murphy's filling station, their polished metal surfaces reflecting light like molten silver in the early sunshine. Tailpipes producing a profound bass note she experienced reverberating through her torso like an embryonic pulse awaiting activation. The front rider possessed an enormous build. His high jacket strained across shoulders that appeared to eclipse the sun completely. Ink designs climbed his throat like shadowy tendrils, narrating tales she couldn't decipher but somehow sensed held significance. His footwear struck the pavement with the heaviness of someone who'd traveled many difficult paths, while the accompanying bikers showed him deference with a regard that Emma recognized from observing her father's interactions with his military comrades during their infrequent video conversations before the connection would invariably disconnect, leaving her gazing at a motionless image, wishing she could reach into the screen and embrace him, that she'd never encountered anyone so daunting. Still, something about his movements, unhurried, purposeful, almost delicate, as he pulled off his riding gloves, one digit at a time, brought to mind how her father used to treat her mother's porcelain cups before his deployment 8 months prior, as though he comprehended that fragile objects demanded cautious handling. One of the bikers shouted toward him, his voice slicing through the morning quiet like a corroded blade, asking if he was becoming tender. Yet the massive man paid no attention, his worn hands unexpectedly gentle as he lifted his helmet with the same solemnity others might reserve for worship, exposing graying hair that captured the illumination like metallic strands and eyes resembling storm clouds laden with unspilled precipitation. Emma observed him resting against his Harley-Davidson, those same eyes far away and empty, gazing at something visible only to him. Without deliberation, without the apprehension that other youngsters might have experienced, she started wheeling her chair across the thoroughfare, the recognizable creak of her left wheel measuring intervals like a timekeeper, gripping her bundle of drooping blossoms like an offering of peace, like something valuable that required sharing before time ran out. The accompanying bikers grew quiet as she drew near, their discussion ceasing mid-phrase, as though someone had muted the entire universe itself. Yet Tank spotted her initially, this miniature girl in a wheelchair, courageous and grinning with 2 absent upper teeth, presenting flowers that were already sagging in the heat but somehow remained lovely in their flaws. Emma simply stated that the flowers were meant for him, her voice pure and melodious as Sunday church chimes. Tank's face broke open like an aged picture exposed to daylight. He descended slowly, his joints protesting with the sound of someone who'd experienced hardship and loved intensely, until their gazes met level, and she could perceive the suffering he bore like pebbles in his garments, a load that appeared bottomless. That night, Tank remained by himself in his garage workspace, encompassed by the recognizable sense of lubricant and rust remover. Emma's drooping wildflowers rested carefully flattened within his vintage photograph collection, positioned beside the final image of Sarah in her medical facility bed. Hairless yet gorgeous and valiant, displaying the identical fearless grin that Emma had offered him mere hours earlier. The overhead fluorescent illumination hummed like an irritated insect, throwing severe shadows over the instruments he'd been employing to reconstruct a 1973 shovelhead motor. Yet his hands had become motionless, quivering faintly as he outlined his daughter's features in the picture with a single rough fingertip. He couldn't dismiss the vision of Emma's bold approach, the manner in which she'd rolled directly toward him without pause, as though she intuitively understood he required precisely what she was presenting. Not merely flowers, but optimism concealed in purity, affection disguised as wildflowers. The workshop entrance remained open to capture the evening air. Current, and through it drifted the noises of his community settling into darkness. Canines barking in remote yards, the drone of cooling units laboring excessively, the mild splash of someone's irrigation system creating rainbows in the fading illumination. Yet Tank's thoughts were across the municipality, reviewing his discussion with Murphy, the filling station proprietor who'd briefed him over harsh coffee that had cooled while they conversed. Murphy had clarified that Emma endured constant harassment at Roosevelt Elementary, his weathered features furrowing with fury as he portrayed youngsters naming her Wheels and barring her from recreation area activities with the thoughtless brutality that solely children could perfect, forcing her to consume lunch in isolation while they murmured and indicated like she was something damaged that might be transmissible. Murphy's own granddaughter, Jessica, attended the identical school and had observed Emma weeping in the girls' restroom repeatedly, cleaning permanent ink from her wheelchair where someone had inscribed, "Freak," in dark letters that appeared to sear into Tank's perception like a marking that would never diminish regardless of how vigorously he attempted to disregard it. The elderly man's hands had trembled with fury as he portrayed discovering Emma following school one afternoon, positioned alone near the flagpole while other youngsters rushed past her toward waiting transport vehicles, their amusement a striking contrast to her silent weeping that etched paths through the powder on her face like streams of misery. Tank's hands tightened into fists as he envisioned those heartless youngsters, their language cutting more profoundly than any weapon he'd confronted in 2 Vietnam deployments. Abruptly, he was recalling Sarah's final statements to him, uttered through lips fractured with medical treatment and fever, yet still powerful enough to make him vow. She'd asked him to promise he'd discover someone else to safeguard when she departed, promise he wouldn't permit all his affection to simply expire with her, like some aged motor nobody recalls how to repair. That he'd made that vow through weeping that had carried the flavor of salt and remorse. Yet until this day, he'd forgotten what it resembled to have someone require him the manner Sarah had required him. To be significant in someone else's existence the way a father is significant to his daughter, the way a guardian is significant to those who cannot guard themselves. The fellowship would comprehend. They were beyond merely bikers. They were military veterans and fathers and grandfathers, men who'd witnessed adequate cruelty in jungles and deserts and urban streets to identify when someone innocent required defending, when someone pure required protecting from an existence that appeared constructed to destroy beautiful objects beneath its indifferent mass. To be why the midnight hour, Tank had completed numerous telephone conversations, his rough voice transmitting across state boundaries like smoke. Communications as he contacted chapters in adjacent cities, clarifying about Emma and what she symbolized, not solely one small girl, but every youngster who'd ever been caused to feel incomplete, every innocent spirit who'd ever required someone to position between them and the obscurity. The reaction was instant and tremendous. Brothers he hadn't communicated with in years, men who'd traveled beside him through tempests both literal and metaphorical, they all expressed the identical sentiment without a moment's uncertainty. "We'll arrive at sunrise, simply inform us where to assemble." The rumbling commenced as a remote whisper, resembling approaching thunder on a cloudless day. Yet by 7:30 in the morning, it had expanded into something that vibrated windows and disturbed coffee vessels throughout the complete Maplewood community. A noise so forceful it appeared to oscillate in the very framework of the residences themselves, declaring that something remarkable was about to transpire on this unremarkable street. Emma's grandmother, Rosa, was braiding Emma's hair when the noise became impossible to disregard. A profound, rhythmic thunder that appeared to pulse, with the heartbeat of something enormous and animated. Emma pushed her face to the parlor window, her respiration misting the glass, and what she perceived made her inhale so audibly that Rosa released the hairbrush and hurried to the window beside her. The street was populating with motorcycles, an infinite flow of chrome and leather that extended as distant as the vision could perceive in both directions. Operators were descending with military exactness, their footwear striking asphalt in coordinated harmony like a percussion announcing something significant was about to develop before their very gazes. Tank positioned at the middle of everything. Yet he appeared altered somehow, more elevated, more resolute, displaying a fresh leather jacket that gleamed like protection in the morning sunlight. Behind him positioned men and women whose features narrated tales of difficult roads and more difficult selections. their insignias showing names like Iron Thunder, Desert Wolves, and Steel Brotherhood. Yet their gazes contained the identical gentle concentration that Emma had perceived in Tank's features the previous day. Rose's hand quivered as she extended toward the telephone, her thoughts racing through catastrophic possibilities. Yet Tank was already at their front entrance, possessing a bouquet of flawless white roses that must have required more than Rosa generated in a week at her employment cleaning residences. He stated respectfully that they had arrived for Emma, his voice bearing none of the threat Rosa had anticipated. Explaining they'd learned she might require an escort to school this particular day, Emma's eyes expanded as she absorbed the impossible scene. Nearly 200 bikers positioned in arrangement on her peaceful street, their machines gleaming like a metallic stream that coursed around automobiles and mailboxes and fire hydrants. Community members had emerged from their residences in bathrobes and footwear, some documenting with their devices, others merely staring in disbelief at this leather-clad force that had materialized from nowhere to safeguard one small girl in a wheelchair. Tank descended beside Emma's wheelchair, his enormous hands unexpectedly delicate as he assisted her into a custom attachment that someone had somehow obtained during the night and adorned with lavender ribbons, her preferred color. How they'd understood lavender was her preference, Emma couldn't fathom, yet it resembled enchantment, like the cosmos itself had conspired to render this moment absolutely flawless in every aspect. Tank inquired if she was prepared to demonstrate those school intimidators what genuine friendship resembled, addressing her as princess, his storm-cloud eyes wrinkling at the edges with something that might have been weeping. Emma acknowledged so enthusiastically that her pigtails bounced like coils, her grin so radiant it could have energized every streetlight in Maplewood for a year. The procession traveled through the municipality like a parade of protective angels, their motors creating a symphony that declared to the world that Emma Martinez was not isolated, had never been isolated, would never be isolated again, as long as there were decent people willing to defend those who couldn't defend themselves. Transportation halted at junctions as operators lowered their windows to observe in amazement. Pedestrians paused on walkways, coffee vessels frozen midway to their mouths. Youngsters on their route to school halted and indicated, their features reflecting the identical wonder Emma experienced burning in her torso like a small celestial body that had been anticipating all her existence to ascend. Even the morning broadcast disc jockey interrupted his playlist to announce, "The most gorgeous thing I've ever witnessed in 20 years of broadcasting." Emma experienced the breeze in her hair and the vibration of Tank's Harley beneath her, oscillating through her framework like a second pulse that coordinated with her own. For the initial occasion in months, she wasn't contemplating the heartless language or the solitary lunches or the weeping she'd produced in restroom compartments while other youngsters recreated outside. She was contemplating how occasionally miracles arrive wrapped in leather and appear on two wheels, declared by the thunder of motors and transported by the spirits of strangers who select to become relatives. When the enormous procession entered the circular pathway at Roosevelt Elementary, the complete school appeared to suspend its respiration. Instructors pushed against classroom windows, their lesson preparations completely abandoned. Youngsters deserted their backpacks and rushed to the barrier, digits gripping the chain link as they observed the impossible parade develop before their disbelieving gazes. Even Principal Williams emerged from his workspace, his coffee growing cold in his palm as he witnessed what he would subsequently name the most remarkable thing in 40 years of instruction. Emma positioned tall in her attachment as Tank cautiously assisted her out, elevating her into her wheelchair with a gentleness that completely contradicted his fearsome appearance. The 200 bikers established a protective passage that extended from the edge to the school's front entrance, their helmets removed in a demonstration of regard that transformed them from intimidating strangers into gentle giants observing over their princess. The intimidators who had harassed Emma, Tyler Richardson, who'd inscribed "freak" on her chair with permanent ink, and Madison Cooper, who'd persuaded other youngsters not to position with her at lunch, positioned frozen in amazement, their mouths suspended open as they comprehended that the quiet girl they dismissed and ridiculed had somehow summoned a force. The authority dynamic had transformed in an instant, and they could experience it in their framework like an earthquake that would alter everything they believed they understood about power and vulnerability, about who merited protection and who merited regard. Tank traveled beside Emma's wheelchair, transporting her backpack adorned with butterfly insignias, as though it were the most valuable cargo he'd ever been entrusted with in all his years of traveling. His enormous frame somehow rendered her look not smaller but more valuable, like something worth protecting, worth defending, worth crossing state boundaries in the middle of the darkness to shield. He stated quietly as they neared the school entrances, his voice dense with sentiment that he didn't attempt to conceal, reminding her what she'd instructed him the previous day. She demonstrated to an aged biker that compassion is the most powerful force in the cosmos. He told her never to permit anyone to cause her to forget how forceful her spirit is. Emma gazed up at him with eyes that glistened with joyful weeping, then back at the ocean of leather and chrome that had assembled in her recognition. For the initial occasion in months, she rolled through those school entrances with her head elevated, her shoulders erect, and her grin radiant enough to illuminate the darkest edges of the corridor. The other youngsters separated like waves as Emma passed, their faces transformed from ridicule to wonder, from brutality to something nearing genuine awe. Even Tyler Richardson, the most severe of her harassers, advanced forward with something that might have been disgrace burning radiant in his gazes that he stammered an apology. His voice scarcely audible above the remote rumble of motors that still resonated through the morning atmosphere like thunder that refused to diminish, stating he didn't understand. He never considered, yet Emma merely grinned, the identical fearless grin she'd offered Tank the previous day, the identical grin her father always stated could illuminate a space from 1,000 miles distant, and rolled past him toward her classroom, leaving forgiveness suspended in the atmosphere like morning vapor. She didn't require his apology to experience complete. She already was. Outside, the noise of 200 motorcycles initiating in flawless unison populated the atmosphere like a sacred vow, a forceful reminder that would resonate through the corridors of Roosevelt Elementary for years and generations to arrive. That compassion, once freely offered, creates ripples that extend far beyond what we can envision, touching existences we may never understand we've contacted, altering spirits we may never perceive transform, inspiring others to transmit that compassion forward in manners we could never anticipate as Tank traveled away with his brothers and sisters, the breeze whipping past his weathered features and Emma's drooping wildflowers still flattened carefully in his jacket pocket proximate to his spirit where they would remain for years to arrive. He contemplated Sarah and how satisfied she would have been to perceive this day develop precisely as it had, how she would have admired this courageous small girl who comprehended instinctively that flowers and grins can repair wounds that language alone never could. The pathway extended out before him like a ribbon of possibility, and for the initial occasion in years, the mass he transported resembled lighter, distributed somehow across the shoulders of 200 brothers and sisters who had responded to his midnight summons without a single moment of uncertainty. Emma, settling into her desk as her classmates assembled around her with fresh curiosity and newfound regard, questions tumbling enthusiastically from their mouths about the bikers and where they originated and whether they'd arrive back tomorrow and the following day and the day following that to escort her again, comprehended something profound that would remain with her for the remainder of her existence, a truth that would direct her through every challenge and triumph that resided ahead. Occasionally, the most improbable heroes are the ones who appear precisely when you require them most, traveling on thunder and displaying leather protection, transporting spirits large enough to alter the complete world, one small act of compassion at a time. Occasionally, all it demands to summon those heroes is a handful of drooping wildflowers and a fearless grin offered freely to a stranger in necessity.